The Cessna Citation business jet maintains a perfect cruise at 41,000 feet, its autopilot guiding it smoothly across the afternoon sky. Below, the landscape of the American Midwest scrolls past, farmland and small towns forming geometric patterns visible from 8 miles up. Inside the cabin, 6 passengers should be relaxing, working or dozing during the flight from Oklahoma to South Dakota. But something is terribly wrong. Nobody aboard is moving. Nobody is conscious. The pilots do not respond to radio calls. The passengers do not look out windows. The aircraft has become a flying tomb, carrying 7 people who can no longer help themselves, flying on autopilot toward a destination none of them will ever reach. Air traffic controllers have been trying to make contact for 20 minutes. Dozens of calls on multiple frequencies produce only silence. Fighter jets have been scrambled, climbing rapidly to intercept this ghost ship in the sky. The pilots will position their aircraft alongside the business jet, close enough to see through the windows, and what they report will send chills through everyone monitoring the situation. The cockpit is empty. Both pilot seats are vacant. No one is at the controls. Through the cabin windows, they can see motionless figures slumped in seats. Nobody moving. Nobody responding. The Citation continues flying northwest on autopilot, fuel slowly draining from its tanks, heading toward the moment when the engines will flame out and the aircraft will fall from the sky. Before I reveal what happened aboard this flight and how it ended, make sure you hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. This is one of the most mysterious and tragic incidents in aviation history, and what investigators discovered changed how we think about pressurization and hypoxia. I am Captain Paul Henderson. In 25 years of commercial aviation, I have dealt with countless emergencies and system failures. But hypoxia, the gradual loss of oxygen that slowly shuts down your brain, is perhaps the most insidious threat we face. Because it does not announce itself with warning bells or flashing lights, it creeps up silently, stealing your consciousness while convincing you that everything is fine. Your judgment fails before you realize you need help. Your vision narrows before you notice something is wrong, and then you simply slip away, unaware that you are dying. This is the story of Sunjet Aviation Flight Tango November, the ghost flight that captivated and horrified the nation as it flew for hours with everyone aboard incapacitated, and the investigation that revealed a simple mechanical failure with devastating consequences. Welcome aboard. October 25th, 2004, a Monday morning. Orlando Sanford International Airport in Florida. The sun shines brightly over central Florida, temperatures already climbing toward 80 degrees. At the General Aviation Terminal, a Cessna 55 Bravo Citation business jet is being prepared for a charter flight. The aircraft is registered November 47 Bravo Alpha, a 10-passenger business jet operated by Sunjet Aviation. It is a relatively new aircraft, well-maintained, with no outstanding mechanical issues. The Citation is a popular business jet, known for reliability and performance, capable of flying at high altitudes where the air is smooth and fuel efficiency is optimal. The passengers for this flight are professional golfers and their associates heading to a tournament in South Dakota. The most notable passenger is Payne Stewart, one of the most recognizable names in professional golf. Stewart is 42 years old at the peak of his career, having recently won the United States Open Championship. He is known not just for his golfing prowess, but for his distinctive style, often wearing knickers and a flat cap in tribute to golf's traditional origins. He is beloved by fans, respected by fellow players, a true gentleman of the game. Also aboard are Stewart's agents Robert Fraley and Van Arden, both accomplished businessmen who represent multiple professional athletes. Golf course designer Bruce Borland is traveling with them to discuss a potential course development project. 2 pilots will fly them to South Dakota. Captain Michael Kling occupies the left seat. He is 43 years old with over 4,000 hours of flight time. He is experienced, professional, holds appropriate ratings for the Citation. First Officer Stephanie Bellagarigue sits in the right seat. She is 27 years old with approximately 1,600 hours total time. She is less experienced than the captain, but fully qualified for this operation. Both pilots are competent professionals. The flight plan calls for a departure from Orlando Sanford, climbing to 41,000 feet, then flying northwest to Aberdeen, South Dakota. Flight time is estimated at approximately 2.5 hours. The weather is excellent along the entire route, with clear skies and light winds. Nothing about this flight suggests any problems. At 9:19 in the morning Eastern Time, the Citation pushes back from its parking position. The pilots start both engines, complete their checklists, and taxi toward the departure runway. Tower clears them for takeoff at 9:27. Captain Kling advances the thrust levers. The Citation accelerates rapidly down the runway and lifts off smoothly, climbing into the Florida morning. The departure is normal, professional, exactly as it should be. They follow their assigned departure procedure, communicating clearly with air traffic control, climbing steadily toward their cruising altitude. At 9:33, just 6 minutes after takeoff, they check in with Jacksonville Center. Jacksonville Center, Sunjet Tango November is with you, climbing through flight level 230. Sunjet Tango November, Jacksonville Center, Roger. Climb and maintain flight level 390. Climb and maintain 390, Tango November. Flight level 390 is 39,000 feet, just 1,000 feet below their final cruising altitude of 41,000. The Citation continues climbing, the autopilot smoothly guiding the aircraft upward through the thin air of high altitude. At 9:38, Jacksonville Center clears them to their final altitude. Sunjet Tango November, climb and maintain flight level 410. There is no response. The controller waits a moment, then tries again. Sunjet Tango November, Jacksonville Center, climb and maintain flight level 410. Still nothing. The controller tries a third time. No response. He switches to the emergency frequency. Sunjet Tango November, Jacksonville on guard, how do you read? Silence. The Citation continues flying, visible on radar, maintaining its previous altitude of 39,000 feet, but no longer responding to any radio calls. Controllers follow standard procedures. They ask other aircraft to attempt contact. They send data link messages. They notify supervisors. Nothing works. The Citation flies on, silent, unresponsive, gradually drifting off course as it continues northwest. At 9:44, just 16 minutes after takeoff, the North American Aerospace Defense Command is notified. An aircraft has lost all radio contact and is not responding to any attempts at communication. NORAD immediately scrambles fighter jets. This is 2004, just 3 years after September 11th. An unresponsive aircraft is treated as a potential national security threat. 2 F-16 Fighting Falcons launch from Tyndall Air Force Base in Florida, climbing rapidly toward the Citation's altitude. Their mission is to intercept, to make visual contact, to determine what is happening aboard the business jet. At 10:08, the fighters reach the Citation. The lead pilot positions his F-16 alongside the business jet, close enough to see clearly through the windows. What he reports is chilling. The cockpit windshield appears to be frosted over or covered with condensation. I cannot see the pilots. Moving aft to check the cabin windows. He maneuvers his fighter to look through the passenger cabin windows. I can see what appears to be a person slumped over in the cabin. No movement, no sign of consciousness. The aircraft appears to be flying on autopilot, with everyone aboard incapacitated. This information is relayed immediately to NORAD Command, to the Federal Aviation Administration, to Sunjet Aviation. The worst fears are confirmed. Everyone aboard appears to be unconscious or dead. The Citation has become a ghost ship, flying itself across the country with no one able to control it. If you are as disturbed by this as I am, go ahead and hit that like button right now. And make sure you stay subscribed, because what happens over the next 4 hours is one of the most tragic spectacles in aviation history. Share this video because understanding hypoxia and pressurization failures is critical for everyone who flies. The Citation continues flying northwest, the autopilot faithfully maintaining heading and altitude. The fighter jets follow, one on each side, the pilots watching helplessly as the business jet flies deeper into the American heartland. They report periodically on what they see. No movement in the cabin, no change in the aircraft's flight path, no response to any attempts at communication. In the cabin, Payne Stewart and his companions are almost certainly already dead, though the fighter pilots cannot confirm this from their vantage point. The passengers sit motionless in their seats, seatbelts fastened, perhaps never even realizing they were in danger. Hypoxia at high altitude is painless, almost gentle in its final stages. You simply lose consciousness and slip away. On the ground, news of the situation spreads rapidly. Media outlets pick up the story. Television networks begin covering it live. Payne Stewart is a public figure, beloved by millions of golf fans. The image of his aircraft flying across the country with everyone aboard, incapacitated, captures public attention in a way few aviation incidents do. Stewart's wife, Tracy, learns of the situation from television news. She watches in horror as networks show live footage of fighter jets escorting her husband's aircraft, as commentators speculate about what might have happened, as the nation watches helplessly while the Citation flies on toward its inevitable end. The aircraft continues northwest for hours, crossing state after state. The fighter jets are relieved by fresh aircraft as fuel runs low, a continuous escort maintaining visual contact with the ghost flight. Controllers track it on radar, calculating fuel consumption, estimating when the engines will flame out. At approximately 12:11 in the afternoon Central Time, nearly 4 hours after the last radio contact, the Citation's engines begin to fail. First one engine flames out as the last fuel is consumed, then the other. The aircraft is now a glider, beginning its final descent toward the Earth below. The fighter pilots watch as the Citation begins descending, the autopilot attempting to maintain control even without engine power. The aircraft spirals downward in a gradually tightening turn, losing altitude steadily. Below is rural South Dakota, farmland and prairie stretching to the horizon. There are no cities, no major population centers, just open country. At approximately 12:14, the Citation impacts a field near Aberdeen, South Dakota, not far from the intended destination. The impact is at high speed. The aircraft nose down in a steep angle. It disintegrates on contact, the wreckage scattering across the field. Fire erupts immediately, though there is little fuel remaining to burn. All 7 people aboard die on impact. Payne Stewart, Robert Fraley, Van Arden, Bruce Borland, Captain Kling, First Officer Bella Garrig, and 1 additional passenger. Their deaths were almost certainly instantaneous, though they had likely been dead for hours before the crash, victims of hypoxia long before the aircraft ran out of fuel. Emergency responders reached the crash site within 30 minutes, but there is nothing they can do. The wreckage is scattered across a large area, the aircraft completely destroyed. There are no survivors to rescue, no injured to treat. They can only secure the scene and wait for investigators. The investigation that follows is exhaustive. The National Transportation Safety Board leads the inquiry, assisted by Cessna, the engine manufacturer, and numerous aviation experts. Investigators face a challenging task. The aircraft was destroyed on impact. Much of the wreckage is badly damaged, but they must determine what caused everyone aboard to become incapacitated. The first major clue comes from the fighter pilot reports. The cockpit windshield was frosted or covered with condensation. This is significant. At high altitude, if the cabin loses pressurization, the temperature inside drops dramatically. Moisture in the air condenses and freezes on cold surfaces. The frosted windshield suggests the cabin was not pressurized, that the interior of the aircraft had been exposed to the frigid temperatures of 41,000 feet. At 41,000 feet, the atmospheric pressure is only about 3 pounds per square inch, compared to 14.7 at sea level. The oxygen content is so low that a person will lose consciousness within 15 to 30 seconds. Without supplemental oxygen, death follows within minutes. Aircraft pressurization systems are designed to maintain a cabin altitude of typically 6,000 to 8,000 feet, even when flying at 40,000 feet or higher. This provides a comfortable environment with sufficient oxygen for passengers and crew. But if the pressurization system fails, if the cabin altitude rises to match the actual altitude outside, everyone aboard will quickly succumb to hypoxia. Investigators focus on the pressurization system. They recover the wreckage of the system components, examining them in laboratories, searching for evidence of failure or malfunction. What they discover is both simple and tragic. The aircraft's pressurization system uses bleed air from the engines to pressurize the cabin. A series of valves control the flow of air into the cabin and the release of air to maintain proper pressure. One of these valves is the outflow valve, which releases excess air to prevent overpressurization. The investigation determines that the outflow valve was not functioning correctly. It was stuck partially open, allowing pressurized air to escape continuously. The system tried to compensate by pumping more air into the cabin, but it could not keep up with the leakage. As the aircraft climbed to 39,000 feet and then 41,000 feet, The cabin altitude rose steadily, following the outside altitude. At some point during the climb, the cabin altitude exceeded 10,000 feet, the altitude at which supplemental oxygen becomes necessary. The pilots should have noticed warnings, should have donned oxygen masks, should have descended immediately to a lower altitude. But the investigation reveals a critical factor. The pilots may not have recognized what was happening in time. Hypoxia affects judgment and awareness before causing unconsciousness. The pilots may have seen the warnings, but not processed them correctly. They may have felt fine, even as their brains were being starved of oxygen. By the time they realized something was wrong, they may have already been too impaired to take effective action. The investigation also reveals that the aircraft was equipped with supplemental oxygen systems. The pilots had quick donning masks within easy reach. The passengers had oxygen bottles installed at their seats. But hypoxia can incapacitate you before you realize you need oxygen. If the pilots did not recognize the pressurization problem early enough, if they did not don their masks within the critical 15 to 30-second window, they would have lost consciousness before they could save themselves. The fighter pilot who first reached the citation reported that the cockpit appeared empty, with no one visible in the pilot seats. This suggests that at some point during the loss of pressurization, perhaps in the final moments before unconsciousness, one or both pilots may have left their seats, possibly attempting to reach the cabin or to check on passengers. They would have collapsed before accomplishing anything, falling unconscious in the aisle or between the seats. The probable cause determined by the National Transportation Safety Board is incapacitation of the flight crew due to hypoxia resulting from a loss of cabin pressurization. The reason for the pressurization failure was a malfunction of the outflow valve, though the investigation could not determine definitively why the valve failed. Contributing factors include the crew's failure to recognize and respond to the pressurization problem before becoming incapacitated. The investigation makes several safety recommendations. Aircraft manufacturers should improve warning systems for pressurization failures, making them more obvious and harder to miss. Training for pilots should emphasize the insidious nature of hypoxia and the critical importance of immediate action when pressurization problems are suspected. Oxygen mask designs should be improved to make them easier to don quickly, even when cognitive function is already degraded. For the families of those who died, the investigation findings provide some closure but little comfort. Their loved ones did not suffer. Hypoxia at high altitude is not painful. They simply lost consciousness and never woke. But they died in a preventable accident, killed by a mechanical failure that should have been survivable if recognized and addressed quickly enough. For the golf world, Payne Stewart's death is a tremendous loss. He was at the peak of his career, with many more years of championship golf ahead of him. He was a role model, a gentleman, beloved by fans and respected by competitors. His death in such a tragic and public way shocks the entire sporting world. The image of the citation flying for hours across the country, everyone aboard already dead, the fighter jets escorting a flying tomb, becomes one of the most haunting spectacles in aviation history. Millions of people watched on live television as the aircraft flew its final journey, knowing that everyone aboard was beyond help, waiting for the inevitable moment when the fuel would run out and the aircraft would fall. For me, as a pilot, this accident reinforces critical lessons about pressurization and hypoxia. First, pressurization failures must be treated as immediate emergencies requiring instant action. If you suspect the cabin is not pressurizing properly, you don your oxygen mask first immediately, before doing anything else. You do not troubleshoot. You do not check gauges. You do not call for checklists. You put the mask on, then you descend immediately to an altitude where oxygen is not required, typically 10,000 feet or below. Second, hypoxia training is essential. All pilots should experience mild hypoxia in a controlled environment, such as an altitude chamber, so they learn to recognize the symptoms in themselves. Euphoria, impaired judgment, tunnel vision, slowed reactions. If you know what hypoxia feels like, you have a better chance of recognizing it and taking action before you lose the ability to save yourself. Third, the time of useful consciousness at high altitude is shockingly brief. At 40,000 feet, you have perhaps 15 to 20 seconds from the moment you realize you have no oxygen until you lose consciousness. That is barely enough time to reach for your mask and get it on. There is no time for hesitation, no time for debate, no time to finish what you are doing. The mask goes on immediately or you will be unconscious before you can save yourself. The families of Payne Stewart and the others who died aboard that citation have established foundations and memorials to honor their loved ones. Stewart's widow, Tracy, has worked tirelessly to keep his memory alive, to ensure that his legacy extends beyond golf, to include his character, his faith and his love for family. The aircraft wreckage was eventually removed from the South Dakota field and taken to a facility for detailed examination. After the investigation concluded, it was destroyed, preventing it from becoming a morbid curiosity or tourist attraction. The field where the citation fell is private farmland, marked only by the memories of those who witnessed the tragedy. But the lessons learned from this accident have saved lives. Enhanced pressurization warning systems, improved hypoxia training, better oxygen mask designs, all of these changes implemented after the Sunjet aviation crash have prevented similar tragedies. Pilots today are more aware of the dangers of hypoxia, more trained to recognize the symptoms, more prepared to take immediate action when pressurization problems occur. The ghost flight of Sunjet Aviation Flight Tango November remains one of the most tragic and mysterious incidents in aviation history. 7 people died, including one of America's most beloved sports figures, in an accident that was both preventable and inevitable once the pressurization failed and the crew did not respond in time. The aircraft flew for nearly 4 hours after everyone aboard was incapacitated, a flying monument to the fragility of human life at high altitude and the critical importance of immediate action when oxygen is lost. This tragedy changed how we train pilots about hypoxia and pressurization failures. If this story taught you something about aviation safety you did not know before, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications for more real aviation investigations. Give this video a like to help spread awareness about the dangers of hypoxia and the importance of immediate action, and share it with anyone interested in aviation, because understanding these tragedies is how we prevent them from happening again. Your engagement helps me continue bringing you these critical safety stories from the cockpit. I am Captain Paul Henderson. Thank you for staying with me through this tragic story. Remember that at high altitude, oxygen is not optional. It is life itself. If you suspect pressurization problems, mask on immediately, then descend. Every second counts. Hesitation kills. Fly safe, know the signs of hypoxia, and always be prepared to act instantly when pressurization is lost. Until next time, this is Captain Paul Henderson signing off.